But you saw all the different strikes across Iran, and we're going to dig into all this, how all this happened, and what the target set is, what the future looks like, and what to expect here in America. I want to say welcome to the crew. You're cleared hot in the chat. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for all the engagement. Love all our regulars and more coming all the time from around the world. Thank you for that. Really, the comments have been fantastic on the show. I had a comment last night saying, I looked all over and you're the only news service who was providing regular updates that I needed. Thank you so much for that. And the guy who was behind all that is with me right now, Brent Beecham. Welcome, sir. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So Brent is my classmate for the U.S. Air Force Academy, and also a former F-15 pilot and A-4 pilot for the only guy I know that flew for the Israeli Air Force and the U.S. Air Force, and for the Delta Airlines Air Force, but and now as a real estate developer. But I wanted to get your take on what's going on here, because you've seen this from so many angles, and that's why I have you on all the time, because your insight is fantastic. Give us the overview of what you think happened last night that people may not be, or that people need to understand.
Yeah, so I think this was a multifaceted attack. I think most people focused in on the part that was the Israeli Air Force making attacks, and in truth, the Mossad was key to all of this. They did something similar to what the Ukrainians did to the Russians.
Yeah.
Which was they stored a bunch of UAVs in country, smuggled them in, and the initial attacks were absolutely coordinated with the Israeli Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So they had targeted all of the air defense sites with these explosive drones, and they were all in place, ready to go. And the minute that the Air Force was ready to attack, they triggered the attacks on the surface-to-air missile sites, and that opened the door wide open for Israeli Air Force to attack all the other strategic targets. And I don't know. I believe that some of the high-value targets they took out, they basically took out the entire leadership of the IRGC. And the regular army and a number of scientists and whether those were drone only attacks or whether they were Air Force fighter attacks, it's not totally clear. You can see some of the buildings that were struck. It appears
you would think, Brent, that the Israeli or Iranian scientists and key figures would stop living in those penthouses, man, because they've been targeted and killed in their bedroom like over and over again. It's amazing.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I think, is the timing. That from stuff that I read, the Iranians kind of expect an attack, but they didn't think it would happen until after the talks were completed with the U.S. today. So they expected this weekend maybe to see something. The fact that they anticipated meeting with the U.S. and maybe the coordinated conversations between Israel and Trump that said, well, I'm guessing Trump probably really didn't want them to attack, but if they're going to, then at least give me a chance to try to negotiate this deal first. And when the deal fell through and they were playing hardball with the U.S., they found out the hard way that that Israel was not going to stand by and watch this happen. And I know a lot of people are worried, why the timing, why now? I believe there was intelligence out there, and Pete Hegseth hinted it as well, that they were within days or weeks of being able to complete a nuclear weapon. And, in the hands of Iran, it's a threat not just to Israel, but it's a threat to everyone.
So that made me wonder, I thought about the Ukraine strikes, as you mentioned, on Russia. I think there's probably some of the same minds behind some of these, in our government or whatever. I mean, because it took them a long time to plan this stuff, right? In Iran. I mean, that's been going on, they said, for 18 months.
I would think at least that long. And of course, they've recruited these guys. And, and I think I saw your interview with the Iranian opposition leader. And I think he's probably not the only one in Iran that's hoping that the Ayatollahs will be gone soon. And I imagine that the Mossad didn't have a whole lot of effort to recruit a significant army within Iran. And
That's a
so
good point. Yeah, that's a good point. And also the drones are here, right? If we're smart, I mean, this is twice this has been used, so other people can think like this as well. The containers, the warehouse, the van parked in the guy's yard that he's never home, that kind of stuff. Farmland next to U.S. air bases with Chinese ownership.
And it may not be just national actors. It could be, we've seen a lot of these rioters all across America. How long before they decide that they're going to do the same thing? And it doesn't have to be at this scale.
Yeah, totally.
Everything's vulnerable at this point. I mean, so everything you thought is safe, surface to air missiles and jamming and whatever. I think the world woke up to a different world this morning.
Totally agree with that. What was the U.S. involvement? There's some reports there was air refueling. Do you know anything about this? I haven't confirmed that. Have you heard anything from your sources?
The only air refueling I saw was the Israeli tankers that I've seen video of, and it's really interesting because my wife was sitting on the couch. We were watching just regular old news, and she was texting with her niece who lives in Israel, and it was like 2 a.m. This is an hour before the attack started. And she said, I woke up in the middle of the night because there's a racket over top of my head that's just ongoing. And so there was an
jets
hour
taken off.
That's jets taken off, and she lives not far from Ramat David, which is a big F-16 base. So that was all marshaling to go for the attack, and that's when I texted you. I said, hey, at 8 o'clock the sirens went off all across Israel, and that was okay. They're already, the bombs are just starting to drop, and it was really, really interesting. I mean, this whole thing was so coordinated, and everybody talked about the beeper attack and the Iranian or the Ukrainian attack on the Russians. This was just a whole nother level beyond that, because they've taken out, I believe, everything that was a ballistic missile that could have been launched is gone. Their surface to air missiles, battery sites are gone. They have zero defense. I saw some reports about some shoot downs of Iranian fighters that did come up to oppose them. At this point, I think Israel can just sit over top of Iran and drop bombs on their nuclear sites. And day two, I'm guessing that's probably the big focus now is to go after the next sites. They took out the Nance reactor site, and now they got to go after the other couple of sites, Fordow and Isfahan.
Well, tell our audience who may not be familiar with air power tactics what air superiority and air supremacy are, because that's you're right. I think that's what Israel is going for.
Right. So air superiority would be in any given moment, in any given space, we're able to control the air, and that's important to have, because you want to have your fighters be able to drop bombs without being harassed by either surface to air or air to air threats. When you have air supremacy, which I believe that's probably what they have now. Literally no one on the ground is safe from attacks from the air, and fighters can fly over virtually unopposed at will as they feel like it. And I don't think Iran has any possibility. I mean, they may have, one missile here and one fighter there, but they don't have any, from the sounds of it, they don't have anything left. Their one response was shoot 100 drones. Not one single ballistic missile has been fired, and 100 drones were all shot down, interestingly, by Saudi Arabia, Jordan, France, Britain, and the U.S.
Yeah.
So
this coordinated defense, definitely.
Yeah. And one other thing is the Home Front Command told everyone, stay at home, stay in your shelter. This is going to be a long fight. and they released people from their homes today from staying. I mean, obviously you want to stay close by a shelter, but they're not saying you have to stay at home right now.
Yeah, which means the
Which,
threat is not as
yeah,
severe as they thought it might be,
right.
right? Because of what
Yeah,
they took out on the ground. And I just want to highlight for our audience sake, we talk a lot about having reporters on the ground and people in different locations. Perfect example, Brent just mentioned, he was texting me. We were literally up on the air about this, boom, right when it happened. You didn't get that from anywhere else, and our audience definitely
yeah.
recognized that. Brent, I'm going to take a break. Can you stay with us?
Sure.
All right, be right back.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before. Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, we can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
We recommend you take this moment to do what we're about to do, which is enjoy an Alp.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
So Brent, I was reading about, and we showed a little of the video in the cold open, the Mossad operatives, which were in country long before planting a lot of these drone. I mean, I read they established a drone base essentially inside Iran, and so that's helicopter infill, I would imagine, or even a paradrop. I don't know, how would they get in that far, do you think?
Well, I believe they're driving in, probably from maybe Azerbaijan or what, and Israel has really, really good contacts in surrounding Muslim states that don't particularly like Iran, and they've driven across. In fact, if you remember back a few years ago, the Mossad infiltrated a warehouse that contained all the nuclear secrets and drove a truck out. They drove it out through northern Iran, through Turkey, found its way out from there. It may have gone into, maybe they flew it out of one of those, northern states.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably, the border is probably not very secure, and they can probably drive trucks in.
Interesting. That's
Yeah.
really, what do you think the main targets were? Air defense at the beginning?
Yeah, well, so I think it was, like I said, it was because they had so many different ways to attack. The drones were going after air defense sites and also ballistic missile sites. The Air Force was going after ballistic missile sites, nuclear sites, and then they went after all the leadership. I mean, they talking about decapitation.
Yeah.
I read a quick piece that Israel had feigned some sort of attack or did something that got all the leadership of the IRGC Air Force people into the headquarters, did something else to keep them there right before the attack. So they made sure that everybody that was in the leadership of the Iranian Air Force was blown up in one single attack. So really, really smart stuff. I heard some other reports where they must have had guys on the ground and they were able to tell them, hey, he moved from this room to that room, so they could switch the point of attack.
Wow.
As they were, shooting missiles at their homes,
At their bedroom in the penthouse.
Yeah.
If you look at the photos, there's like a big tall building, and then the hole, and then the rest of the whole room is blown out. Just amazing.
The intelligence of this just is unreal. But you had to have the participation of Iranian people. I think they're ready to throw off the Ayatollahs, and this is, if they don't take this opportunity, this may be the last opportunity they have to really have a shot at overthrowing these guys. And I believe they also took out Khomeini's closest advisor. So they got really close to him. I don't know if they intentionally didn't get him or they just didn't have intel to get him, but If they're flying overhead for the next 2 weeks unopposed, if they can find him, and if you're an Iranian, I'm guessing they're probably going, yeah, he's in that building right over there.
Yeah. That's a good point, because the people do not like this regime. I mean,
No.
we've talked about that in depth, and the murder and the torture and I mean,
Right.
it's been going on for 50 years. They just don't like this group. And you're right. Regime change is probably the goal here, and it's different because Trump, this administration, may be for that, whereas previously that was not the goal. They were trying to keep this
Correct.
regime in power with Obama, with the $1 billion in cash, and
Yep.
letting them have drones, American drones, so they could reverse engineer them and all of this stuff, and the media going after any kind of uprising and tamping it down. Just That's a fantastic point, actually.
Yeah.
What equipment do you think was used on the Israeli side?
Pretty much everything they had in their arsenal.
Mm.
F-35s. I've seen video of F-15s flying overhead, and they were F-15s that appeared to be flying as air cover, not as additional attack capability. F-16s I've seen flying in and out. They use a 707, a converted 707 for their tankers. Some of actually in the videos that you showed, you see some like barrage of missiles that are flying in. I think those are probably something like an AGM-132, which is or 135. It's the Popeye missile from Rafael, because it was those were like multiple rockets, missiles that were being fired at one time. So they use just about it. And now, of course, the bunker, they have bunker busting bombs. They don't have what we have in the U.S. Air Force with the B-2s are able to drop a much larger bomb. But you don't have to get all the way there on one strike if you have air supremacy.
Right. Well, that's the whole point, right? And
right.
And you're talking about F-16 use. I mean, you don't fly F-16s in this kind of threat environment unless you've degraded the systems pretty heavily, right? I mean, that's a 1970s technology, so it's not stealthy. It's kind of like the weapon you use if you have nothing to shoot at you, right?
Yeah, and that's pretty much. I mean, whether we were going to fight it with the Soviets or when we fought in Iraq, air defense systems have to be degraded in order to fly those kind of airplanes around. Otherwise, they start dropping like flies. And
what is the Wild Weasel platform, or is that even needed anymore? Where they would, suppression of enemy air defenses, you see something light up and you attack it, or is that done by standoff weapons now?
I think Israel's using drones in that case to take out those systems, and they've been doing things like that for a long time. The U.S. still uses F-16s and F-18s to do that role, but it's kind of a combined role between those different aircraft. But Israel's using drones for that, and in this case, it looked like they were drones that were inside of Iran pre-positioned.
I want to find out. I'm sure we'll find out more about that in the future, but as a special ops guy, I'm highly interested in that. What do you think? You think there's not going to be, because there's a lot of press out there about, coming mass casualty in Israel with hospitals on alert and all. You don't think that's going to happen?
I don't think so. If there was an attack, I mean, if you're Iran and you're in the middle of this, and you've just lost half your leadership, and you haven't launched ballistic missiles yet, I'm not sure where those are going to come from. And unlike us, Israel's a much smaller country, and you have a population that kind of loves its own country, unlike maybe the U.S. So there's not going to be many opportunities for them. Of course, there are populations within Israel that might be co-opted, but I just don't see. Even Hezbollah came out and said we're not joining in on the attack. Just to be clear, we're not doing anything. And there were some rockets that were fired at northern Israel in the last couple of hours, and I suspect those were either rogue elements within Hezbollah, or maybe Hezbollah kind of went, okay, we'll shoot a few just to say we're on your side.
Right.
Hamas is going, oh, Israel's getting closer to its own destruction because they're making these strategic errors, first in Gaza and now in Iran. And I'm not seeing it. And
Yeah.
even the Houthis, who you would think would have some, ability to, they've been able to attack Israel pretty regularly. They haven't launched a bunch of missiles. So has Israel and the U.S. destroyed that capability to a degree, or are they just holding off, saying, "Well, that's Iran's problem, and we'll fire one here and one there to keep our reserve." But so
Mhm.
I've not seen. You think back 2 years ago, and Israel was surrounded by Hamas with thousands of rockets that could hit Tel Aviv or Ashdod or Ashkelon, Jerusalem, Beersheba.
Mhm.
You had Hezbollah with reportedly 150,000 rockets and missiles that could obliterate Israel. You had Syria, that was certainly no friend of Israel and was the supply base for Iranians to drop stuff into Lebanon. And you had the Iranian regime with nuclear weapons ready to be deployed and thousands of ballistic missiles. How many missiles have hit Israel in the last 2 years?
2 or
Virtually
3.
none.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
virtually
about it.
none.
Yeah.
So and
It
no
is,
no real casualty.
what I was noticing, kind of the confusion of the Iranian leadership after this decapitation strike, reminded me of the Hezbollah pager thing, where all of a
Right.
sudden they're just like, the younger guys are in charge and they don't know what to do and everybody else is dead.
Right. Well, and I think that's probably indicative of a regime like Iran, where they're so concerned about maintaining power that anybody
Mhm.
that looks like they just have the slightest hint of disloyalty, they probably execute them.
Yeah.
And I was listening to an Israeli commentator who was of Iranian descent, and he said there is no backup leadership to speak of because they basically weeded them all out.
Yeah.
Stalin did the same thing in the Soviet Union prior to World War II. All his generals that were actually capable of doing anything were in gulags. So
Fantastic point. What do you think the next wave? The Israelis are talking about a 2-week operation and there'll be multiple waves. Any
right,
thoughts on that?
yeah, I think this will be uh, opportunities for leadership strikes and to ensure that the nuclear facilities are disabled permanently.
Mhm.
And, of course, there's probably going to be guys sitting overhead waiting for any kind of ballistic missile to be rolled out. I saw another report this morning that they had some underground storage that they were moving the ballistic missiles to other locations, dispersing them, and they were being bombed as they were being moved.
Hmm.
So um, I think it's a defensive guard with conventional airplanes to ensure that nothing, no ballistic missile gets launched, or they can limit that kind of attack, and then just spend all this time blowing the different facilities up.
Wow. I think
it,
that's all the questions I had. Do you have anything else you want to say?
no it's I mean, what a world we live in.
Yeah, no
I,
kidding.
I, I mean, you think that you've seen it all, and um, things have just absolutely turned upside down again.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to hear the squad in their reaction today. I'm sure there's going to be some really really good um, GOP commercials being filmed today by the squad in America, talking about how Israel attacked the poor Iranians, and how many Iranian flags are going to go up on
Yeah.
Facebook pages today.
Well,
That's what worries me.
well, yeah, we'll monitor that. But there's also the point that Obama was obviously pro-Iran, and there's a lot of,
Yes.
still to this day, pro-Iranians in the government, the U.S. government, spies even. I think some of them
Yep.
are still there, which they need to be removed, obviously. But the arrogance they had is gone, I
Yeah.
think. Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And there was an uprising during the Obama era. We could have backed it,
Mm-hmm.
and we chose not to. and that
Yeah.
that how many people have been, tortured and killed and, terrorized by a regime because we didn't support an attempted revolution. But again, I think this, if there's ever an opportunity, this is it. And it could be really interesting in the next few days what happens within Iran. I think that's the next thing you got to watch out for is, when are the uprisings in the street happen, if they happen.
That's a good point as well. And what does Israel have planned? And obviously there are other intelligence agencies involved here.
Yeah.
And I'm writing an article now. This is time for Trump to be the real statesman here.
Yeah.
I mean, to really thread the needle and move the world forward with as little bloodshed as possible. So
yeah.
Anyway, Brent, thank you so much. And incredible insight. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Take care.
Take
Thanks
care.
for the flow of info all night long. Kept me up all night, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's all right, man.
It's part of the business.
It is part of the business. Take care, man.
All right,
Ciao.
thanks.